to get to the scale we've got to, like you needed an insane growth rate, right? Like to grow anything above like 10% a month is just really hard. Hi everyone, welcome to Founders in Arms with me, Immad Akhund, co-founder and CEO of Mercury.
And I'm Raj Suri, co-founder of Lima and Tribe. And today we are welcoming back Hiten Shah of many startups, now working at Dropbox, having sold his company there. Welcome back, Hiten.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, so today we're going to be covering the news of the week. It seems like the biggest news in startup land, actually, apart from maybe some new AI models. Which, who cares about those, right?
Gimli dropped, apart from that, yeah.
Immad and Mercury's big round, $300 million, led by Sequoia, Series C, valuation of, what was it, 3.6 billion?
3.5 billion, yeah.
0.5, oh, sorry, I gave you a little bit extra there. And, it got a lot of coverage. Immad, your press team did a good job, looks like.
Yeah, it was fun. We were actually like a little worried because a ton of stuff had leaked like a month ago.
That's right.
It turns out like tech press is getting better at like getting access to this like VC data. But it seemed like, us actually telling the story, and we announced some new stuff as well. We added a couple of board members. Actually the ex-CEO of Fannie Mae, who ran the SVB Bridge Bank briefly, joined as a board member. So that was exciting, and we announced that as well. But yeah, really, really fun day yesterday. And we also emailed the customers, and we also did this thing where we're basically like, we're spending like 50K and paying for like people's like coffees and teas for the week as a celebration.
Tell me about
of
that.
the
how did that was an interesting thing. I've never seen that before.
Honestly, I only just found out about it after someone tweeted about it. I was like, they were like, "Oh, Mercury just paid for my coffee as part of the Series C." I was like, "Are we doing that?" And I was like, "Are we doing that?" And someone was like, "Yeah, we're doing that." I was like, "Okay, that's sick."
That's the sign of a well-run company. So
I know,
I love you can raise all the money you want, but that's what got me. I'm like, oh, he didn't know that dope stuff was happening at his company, and he found out when everyone else did. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I love it when that happens, and like the right thing happens, and like I had no involvement in it.
Super cool.
That's a cool idea. I've never heard of anyone doing that before. Like,
so we have this like actually ongoing thing where we randomly we do pay for people's coffee and tea. So this is like a long running program for like a year plus. And normally the budget for it is like pretty small. We just do it infrequently, and it's just like a fun thing to do. I know we had this idea like several years ago, but this week we're running like a much more kind of inflated version of it. But we've always had this like tea theme at Mercury, like since the start. Like our top customers, we'll send them tea. We've just always done that.
There you go. He's having some tea.
So
right
it's
now,
just like a thing that's like developed over years, which
have
actually
you ever
makes
tried,
it better.
Have you ever tried pu'er tea?
No, what's that?
That's what I'm drinking.
It's Chinese tea.
It's fermented tea, fermented green tea.
Oh,
and
is this
I swear by it. Yeah, I love it.
Is it caffeinated?
Yes, it is caffeinated.
Yeah, maybe you should try it.
Part of the point, yeah.
Yeah, it is part of the point.
I normally just do like these basic British black teas, like PG tips.
With milk?
Half the people in the UK have, I think.
With milk and sugar?
Yes,
straight like Hiten.
You gotta have milk and sugar.
This one is better straight, but it tastes a little bit like dirt because it's fermented.
Yeah.
I had a question. And I haven't watched any of the interviews. It's kind of intentional. So I don't know what was asked or if you clarified this, but my understanding is the 300 million wasn't all equity and there was some debt related thing or something like that. Am I right or wrong? There's some anecdote I read. I just want to make sure we talk about what does that 300 million actually mean?
Yeah, 300 million is a combination of primary and secondary. It's mostly primary. We just did a fairly significant chunk to do employee tender offer.
Cool.
Basically make it possible for kind of early employees.
Yeah.
They have to all work at Mercury to sell some shares. We have a separate deadline that's like 100 million. But yeah, I think that's always cheating when people throw in the debt in the equity raise.
Just calling it out to make sure that, what it is, which is an equity round, and all of the 300 was that, because I think that's like a fact I would have checked just to make sure. So.
And Immad, you've been profitable, he says, for 10 quarters. And so like, given that, I mean, what was the impetus behind the raise at all? I mean, you're doing so well anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, the biggest factor is like we hire a lot of people, right? We're gonna go from like I think we started the year at like 780 and we're gonna end it at like 1,000-ish. Uh and when we hire people, part of the comp is equity, and we try to give people like fairly generous equity options. But people are just stuck on this 2021 valuation that we did, which was a 1.6 billion valuation. And like we can say, oh, we're worth so much more, and like look at all of these metrics, but
No.
rightfully so, people are already skeptical of 2021 valuations. And then if we're like we're worth a lot more than that, it's like people just are like, yeah, they don't take us seriously. So that was the biggest factor, and actually, for a startup at our scale, when you're hiring so many people, we do about 4-ish% in stock-based comp dilution, basically. I mean, all companies, tech companies do it. So that's pretty significant. And if we can have a higher valuation, uh, that makes a big difference to people. Weirdly, and I think this is a little contradictory, like you would think employees would want to join companies with the lowest valuation possible because then they have the biggest upside possible. But the reality is, like, your bigger valuations do attract more talent as well. People go like, oh wow, this company's made it, it's a high growth company. These kind of outside factors like do influence people's choices. So I think it'll also make it like a little easier for us to hire going forward. That was actually the biggest driver, like talent and things associated with that. I would also say it's not that high a dilution for us. Like it's way less than 10% dilution. So, and we do get 200 plus million, which is, although we do have a big balance sheet, it's always nice to have more money in terms of acquisitions. Crazy stuff happens every year or so in the macro world and geopolitics and all of this. So having a bigger kind of war chest for whatever happens is also useful.
And it's a top investor, Sequoia, too.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So it's a good partner. One of the few, I would say, great investors in the space.
We did an analysis a while ago, and like the percentage of portfolio companies that use Mercury is way, way higher if the VC is an investor. So like for Andreessen Horowitz and CRV, it's like above 50% because they were like our seed and Series A investors, which is weird because like I don't think those VCs do that much to encourage Mercury among their customers, but there's some sort of like thing that happens where like if you invested in Mercury, it's much, much higher chance that like your portfolio company uses Mercury. So I think we actually both got Sequoia in this round and also Spark. So having like two more kind of top tier VCs as investors is definitely hopefully going to directly help there.
I wanted to give a statement that I try to give founders a lot when they're raising that you reminded me of, which is basically this idea that there's massive incentive alignment when the investors can get you customers. Because, and I'm not saying you're doing that deliberately, but it just reminded me that like when you can find that alignment, it's like they bring you customers, your revenue goes up, the valuation of the company goes up. As long as it's all real and it's on actual value in the company, I think that there's a massive win-win-win.
Yeah, I'm 100% aligned with that. I mean, we had 60 seed stage investors because I was like, I want to get, and I deliberately targeted people they have like 100 plus portfolio companies. So like we had SV Angels and Liquid 2 and all these people because I was like, I want to get as many of their portfolio companies as possible.
Especially when you're in a business like yours, right? Like I think one of the most impressive things about your business to me is that you have such a massive market and are attacking it from the ground. Right, startups are the ground. There's a high volume of startups. I know SMBs as well, but startups is just a good starting point considering all the things that are happening in the ecosystem and have happened. I'm sure you've not deliberately taken advantage of some of the pitfalls of the banking system, but definitely are attacking it. I mean, I would just say that I don't think any of this would be possible if you actually didn't care about doing a great job for your customers. So to me, when I look at in your specific case and this business, especially as I use the product or talk to people that use the product, no one can say anything bad about the product. That's like very rare. And I have to give you that. I care about product probably more than I care about anything else when it comes to business. And like, I can't find anyone saying anything critical enough about the product where like it would dissuade someone from using it. And then on top of that, you're dealing with low NPS, crazy fragmented industry and ones where like everyone has a complaint about their bank. right?
Well,
So
as a CEO, I deal with a lot of people complaining about Mercury. So I wish there was absolutely zero problems, but one of my thesis is that like if it's a bug, you fix it straight away. Like it's not on the backlog. It's like you get it done kind of thing. And actually, the scope of things you consider bugs should be pretty broad. Like if the button says something incorrect and it's confusing, that's a bug. It's not like a badly done feature. I think that actually helps keep like a much higher kind of quality standard when you have those standards for yourself.
see, these are the topics I care about, but we should talk about fundraising and funding and your lessons, right? So
Yeah.
We got
what do you got
two
for us?
we got two people who don't believe in VC fundraising.
Well,
It's a
I
difficult
shouldn't
audience.
say I don't believe in it. I believe in it for the right businesses, and you're
Sure.
on to the right business to do it for. So just
I would say like I have a bunch of like philosophical differences in the way I fundraise that are probably like pretty different from like most people. Like number one, I do it very relatively infrequently. Like we did one in 2017, one 2019, 121, and then one now. So for the scale the company's at, we've only done like 4 real fundraisers. So I think if you do it infrequently, like you're diluting yourself less, you're wasting less time, and you're just making more progress between the rounds as well. Like I mean, I kind of vaguely get it, but I think it's generally a bad idea for these companies that raise every like 6 to 9 months. Like, I don't think that's like a great move. So part of that is like we tend to over raise a little bit. I mean, it's helped that Mercury's always been a hot-ish company, but every time I've gone to raise, this whole idea that VCs try to sell you is like, oh, only raise for 1.5 years and like, have this plan to justify this raise. Like, it's actually all kind of BS. Like, I think it's much better to like the valuation is a valuation which is based on like progress and market dynamics. It's not based on like how much you should be raising, right? So you try to maximize the valuation and then you raise like a big chunk and don't spend it. Like we don't, when we raised 120 million in 2021. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to spend this, right? Like we made money as a company and we've always had like pretty good unit economics. So it was very much like, hey, it's 2021. Like it's time to do a reasonable fundraise because this market is not going to exist forever. And yeah, we've grown into the valuation, of course, but it wasn't like, we deliberately overraised so that we had that extended capital. And then lastly, I only try to raise when like it's not when I need it. It's when like things are sufficiently de-risked that I think I can, and the market is in a good position, and I think I can get a good round done. So yeah, I think all the points we've raised, we either haven't needed the money or we had another like several years of runway, and it just makes the whole thing like way less stressful. In my previous companies, there was just so many times where I was like always close to the wire and running out of money and like just like stressing out about it. Whereas at Mercury, I mean, we're like 7 or 8 years in. Like, there's never been a point where we've been at all stressed about running out of money. Which has been like obviously there's some privilege here, so like it's not always achievable, but it has been like partly a deliberate plan.
yeah, a parallel that I think about. So I sold my company when we had 18 months of runway.
Yeah.
And the parallel I think about is like, can you grow into your valuation? When should you raise based on being able to grow into the valuation? And the milestone should be more about the company, not about the fundraising, and
Yep.
company as in customer validation. But the one question I had for you, which I always like to ask in this scenario, because you're a multi-time founder, how conscious were you of those gaps not gaps, but other people would perceive those gaps in the fundraising? So how conscious were you when you raised the first round as to that being your approach, or is that something you kind of evolved into as you realized what business you were in or some other factor?
Sorry, what do you mean by gaps? Like things
So
they have to
you're
grow
saying
into?
basically you had a non-standard fundraising process. Many would say it's gaps, right? Like 6-9 months, that's a little aggressive. I think most people are like within a year or 18 months of the last round, you should raise the next round, right? To keep showing
I
the
see.
thing.
I
So
don't think
how conscious were you is all I'm asking about that. Because like you pointed out, it's
yeah.
non-standard. Most people don't do it like that.
I don't think VCs care. Like, I don't like, well, they care about like, what's your scale? What's your growth rate? Like, what are the margins? Like, they care about like the actual things, and like obviously how good's the product and customers. Like whether you raise after 3 years or 2 years, I don't think they actually care about that. I think the reason that it's sometimes seen as like a gap or failure is because it like maybe shows some weakness or something like that. But if you're coming in with like a strong company with like strong metrics, like VCs are not like, wow, you haven't raised for 3 years, we're not touching this.
So you just busted one myth. So love it. It's great.
Yeah, I really don't think anyone cares about that one. But I do think growth rate is really important. I mean, I think like sometimes founders underestimate how important growth rate is. Like a VC, I mean, also like actually I look at like every, back in the last 7 years, right? To get to the scale we've got to, like you needed an insane growth rate, right? Like to grow anything above like 10% a month is just really hard. And to do that for like 24 months or something is like almost impossible. But that's like kind of the numbers you need to go from like, if you're starting at 100K and you want to end up in revenue and you want to end up at like 10 million in revenue, like that's not going to happen at 5% growth, right? That needs like an insane compounding growth rate. And so VCs are like very sensitive to that. And like, I think as a founder, you have to be very sensitive to it. If you want to reach this kind of huge scale, it's very hard to like kind of limp your way to that scale. Like you need to have like a pretty insane growth rate. So VCs are very sensitive to that. I think that is like by far the biggest factors, and people I think often underestimate it. I think VCs sometimes overestimate it. Like they, with these AI companies, they're like, oh my God, they just grew from like 1 to 10 million in like 3 months. Look at this insane growth rate. But like, sometimes that's not like sustainable necessarily. But it is like, the whole ecosystem is built on growth rates.
I'm going to ask it almost the same thing I did before, which is how conscious were you of that when you started the business? And how did you think about it in the early days, this growth rate thing, if you did? Mainly because I think like you're sharing something that is often just completely misunderstood as to why the investors want that growth rate and what they're doing in their heads when they see those numbers or don't see those numbers.
I was conscious in the sense that like I think sometimes founders don't do this. It's like I think you should just open up a spreadsheet and just go like every month, like what am I gonna do and what does it take to do it, right? Like, and we did that. Like every round I've ever done, like I've gone and written something and it's like, okay, I'm gonna try to get this many customers in month 1 and month 2, and like what does it look like in month 10, and like what are my assumptions on like deposits and spend and revenue and like sales costs and all of these things. And if you map that out, uh, often it looks kind of insane to keep that exponential going, but it makes it like very tangible. You have to say, okay, I have to go get like whatever 50 customers this month, otherwise like I'm behind. And I tend to do this before the fundraise, and then I do it again after the fundraise. And for me, like a fundraise by itself is like, it's not like a relaxing congratulatory time for me. I mean, actually, yesterday was pretty fun on like Twitter and just having fun, like talking about it. But in general, it's like a pretty stressful moment because it's like now you're like committed to like, you made
A
all
new
these
plan.
promises, right?
Yeah, it's a
And
new
like,
plan.
and you've got a plan and you've got to execute on that plan. Yeah. And it's a difficult plan normally. So yeah, I do this like upfront thing. And then I normally even, I mean, we don't have to do it anymore since we're profitable, but before we're profitable, I used to like map it all the way out and say, okay, this is the point where I'm going to raise. And like, even that's 2 years away or something like that. I map that out and I'm like, okay, this is the revenue I need to hit. This is the growth rate I need to hit. This is how I'm going to get. I mean, it's definitely tricky when you have nothing, right? Like when you haven't launched, you're making a ton of assumptions, right? Like, I mean, even now we just launched like Mercury Personal last year, and like all of our assumptions are wrong, right? Like it's like the amount of like money in those accounts is like 3x bigger than we expected, and yeah, that's just like it's very hard to predict like real behavior. But you do your best job, and then hopefully you underestimate. But it also helps you realize like, oh, actually, like I'm behind on something. Like if you're a sales driven kind of company, you have to say, okay, I need to go hire like 5 salespeople to like hit these objectives. If you're like, whatever are the levers of your business, it like makes them very real when you have that like mapped out.
Yeah, I think it's a really important discipline. It's a really important like operational discipline to like have numbers against everything you do. And I've seen great operators do that really well. But so, and I, Immad, as an early investor, your thing, I saw your updates every month, right? And I was really impressed actually by how well you structured your updates, like how quantitative they were. Like you had a lot of charts, a lot of graphs. It made me very confident that you knew your business inside out and that you were instrumenting your business right. And then it's a mark of a really well run company when they have like very detailed charts. You do it, I think. Also, Mateo, who you introduced me to from Emmy, also does this, right? And but many founders don't. Oh, I would say most founders. I would even say
I don't.
myself. I'm not like that. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
as good as you
I
guys
feel
at
like
that.
actually like sometimes founders don't understand the point of investor updates. Like they think it's for the investors, which I think is like actually missing the point. Like to me, the biggest value number one was like, you know, back then I used to do every 2 months, just like every 2 months, just like stepping back from my business and saying like, here's all the things I said I was going to do. Did I do them? Here's all the things that we said we, yeah. And like, what is going wrong? Like, what are the metrics? Like, what really matters? So like just stepping back and doing that every 2 months, like there was no, when you're a small company and you don't have a board, there's no real forcing function to like force you to think long term. So I found it valuable for that. And then number two, I shared it with the whole team. So it was like, yeah, and it's not something that I just wrote for myself. Like I was like, hey, this is going out to all of our investors. Like this is what you're going to be held accountable to. And it was like, here's the 10 things we want to do in the next 2 months, right? Like this was like very, very specific. And people were signing up for that, but they were also seeing like what was the most important thing to the company. And then lastly, I did send it to the investors, and I think it is nice for people to see it because then like, I think people underestimate like how much relationships and that kind of like information matters when like things are not going well. Like every now and then, like I have like a company I invested in that's like, hey, we need more money. I'm like, I invested like 2 years ago. I have no idea what you've done. You've never sent me an investor update. I'm like, okay, you need money, but like you're like a stranger to me because you've never kept me up to date. Versus like another company that's like, maybe struggled, but I've seen like what they've tried to do and what their thinking has been during that struggle. And sometimes I'm really impressed by entrepreneurs that have like completely failed, right? Like I'm left with going like, wow, they like tried everything and like they just hit a brick wall and, they power through the brick wall, but it still didn't work out. And that's like so impressive. So yeah, I don't know why everyone doesn't do great investor updates. Like I really think people like under leverage that as a tool for a seed stage company. I mean, obviously when you're like Series B and plus, you've got a board and it's a different situation.
I would just recommend that you kind of, I think your investor updates are probably best in class. I mean, from all the companies I've seen, you might want to open source some of them, redacting some numbers, because I think it could
Yeah,
actually help the community.
I do share them quite often with people. So maybe I should just try to open source it a little, as you say.
We actually sent investor updates 3 months before we raised any money. And we believed in the same thing you did, which is like the team should see the same updates, pretty much exactly the same. We actually even made our all hands a quick review of the updates.
Yeah.
So we kind of scheduled things like that. I think you gave away the 2 secrets to venture capital as a founder, though. And I just want to double click on both of them. So one is the way I've referred to this is a startup is a race to actuals in a spreadsheet. And you basically just kind of prove that point with your whole journey and how you were describing it as like, hey, we don't know what's going on, but we're going to go mock it up and figure out like how to get that. And you also gave a good example of like how to work backward from something. So if 10% is the growth rate that you're aiming for, if you don't do what you did, you're probably not going to get there. Someone has to do it. And it's better if you're doing it early on. And I think the second secret is what you just talked about, that like, we sent an investor update every month on the first Monday of the month, even if it was a holiday, at 8 a.m. Pacific, and they got it. And there was just a process from like Thursday or Friday all the way to Monday to just get that done well with the intention of informing everyone about the business. That became a religion, and then you just got better at it. Just like everything else, you get better at it as you do it too. But between those two things, you can successfully at least do everything that you should be doing as a founder that I consider requirements if you're taking venture capital. That's why I think you gave away the secrets, and there's no secret there except that most people just don't do the rigor around both of those things. But I think they're very interconnected and related.
Immad, I have a question about market, right? So like when I'm investing in like public companies, like in tech, which are maybe smaller scale, I'm looking at the market and how much room they have to grow, right? And that's like a big thesis of mine is like good founders, you want that in a tech company, of course. Good product, you want that. You tick all these boxes, but room to grow is actually a really important thing, right? And how do you think about your room to grow from here, like based on your current penetration and how big the market is?
Yeah, I mean, we're in like a almost infinite market. Like banks in the US make 2 trillion, so
Mhm.
and I don't think of
Revenue?
ourselves in like 2 trillion in revenue, and I don't think of ourselves in like a particular box. I mean, we're obviously expanding both our customer segments. So we do startups, e-commerce, and professional services. We're starting doing personal banking as well, and then we're also expanding the product base. So last year we did like invoicing and bill pay and reimbursements. We've got some other stuff coming up. Our credit card is like 2.5 years old and it's growing like super fast. So uh, I think the important thing for like earlier founders is like, what's your landing market, right? Like I think uh, like you need to be in a space where you have that expanding market as well. And like obviously banking is like, especially like we don't do like some niche of banking. We just give you an operational bank account for your business. So it's like a pretty broad product, but there was like a landing, right? Like we were like, hey, we're gonna first nail early stage startups. Uh, and actually, it's like relatively rare that like early stage startups by itself is like a $1 billion market, right? Like for most companies, if you're like, I'm gonna go and nail early stage startups for X. I don't know what's like a good X example, like a developer tool that like helps you manage your database or something. I don't know. Like most companies, when they go after early stage startups, it's just not that big a market. But in banking, that was like SVB was like 16 billion when like I initially did a seed round, but they were 40 billion at peak. So already a pretty big market just for early stage startups. So I think I think it is important to have like your initial landing market to be big enough that you can hit a critical mass enough that you can have a chance to go after like the next thing, like whether that's the
Yeah, and
next
you can
product
achieve
or
that growth
the
rate,
next
right? Because
customer
like
set. Yeah.
growth rate is dependent on market size.
Yeah. Sometimes I like talk to a company and they're like, we're going to go do Y later, but like we're going to start at X and X is like this, you do the math with them and you're like, okay, let's discount that, etc. And like it turns out like it's like a $10 million like revenue opportunity. And I'm like, all right. So like a lot of things have to go right and then you'll get $10 million and then you can do your other thing. And it's just like, I'm like, I don't think this like makes sense. And so actually fintech companies are also like often bad because they'll come up with their first wedge as something that's like just massively underwater. Like the unit economics don't make sense. They're like selling like, they're selling $100 and it's costing them like $105 to sell it kind of thing. And I also think that doesn't work. Like I think that first market actually has to be like a pretty nice, healthy market, and then once you win that, that gives you like that gives you the right to go try to win something else.
Yeah, that should be a sustaining market by itself. Like
Yeah,
you could have a successful company just in that market.
exactly.
How did you
Choose what?
the
Which
market?
investor?
The
Oh, which
market.
market? It's a combination of things. Like I would say the biggest one, and everything else is almost like a post hoc justification. The biggest one is like I really, really wanted this.
Cool.
Like I
Good
was running
reason.
my company, and it was just so painful to do banking. Like I hate calling people, and like we literally had, in that company we used to do payouts to like publishers. So it was the way it monetized was an ad network. So we used to do like 300 payouts, and like we had like 3 people who'd log into this banking interface, spend like 3 days like making one payout at a time. It was just ridiculous. Like and like I asked like someone fairly senior there. I was like, hey, why can't we just get an API? And they were like, what's an API? It's it's like that kind of thing. So I think that was like my big thing. I was like, okay, like this thing needs to exist. I would use it. And that was initial, but like obviously I needed to have like all the post hoc parts of it. It was like I thought there was a big trend in fintech, and this is happening in Europe where there was more and more companies that were doing neobanking and doing it successfully. So I didn't see why you couldn't do it in the US. And then B, when you look at that top down market size, like I like things that like are measured as a percentage of GDP, right? It's like, and there's not that many of them. It's like finance, healthcare, education, military, uh, transportation, and like 2 other things or something. So those kind of markets are like huge and like particularly exciting. But it definitely came from this like initial like pain point for as a customer.
I read a stat that you have about 200,000 customers today, but the market is tens of millions, including every small business in America. But that's a huge. I mean, you're less than 2% penetrated, in the market. So there's a lot of room to grow. Do you anticipate that a restaurant operator, in Kansas City or something is going to be using Mercury one day?
I think it's, especially when you look at these like huge markets, I think it's like important to go one by one rather than going like, go to a restaurant, and actually probably a lot of restaurants do use Mercury. But, we don't deal with cash right now. Yeah, I guess that's going away in a lot of restaurants, but there's still a lot of cash happening at restaurants. So that's a factor. We haven't, in the startup space, for example, we built a lot of tools that are very startup centric. So we have like a safe thing where you can like send someone a safe. It generates an account number that's just for that safe, so that when someone pays off the safe, we can mark it as like investment made, right?
Hmm.
And similarly with e-commerce, we've done we have a credit line of credit product that's like just for e-commerce. So I rather than like trying to do everyone straight away and like being like just mediocre for everyone, I really want to go like market by market. So the three we're really focused on is professional service, e-commerce, and startups. And I mean, all three of them are huge. So yeah, restaurants maybe eventually, and yeah, I do want to get to a pretty broad set of businesses. But even those three, like I think we could be happy servicing them, and we would grow very fast if we nail those three for the next like 3 to 4 years.
Hmm. Maybe let's switch to product. This is Hiten's favorite area. But we'd love to hear, Immad, from you. Like, what are you most proud of in the product so far? Like, when you're like looking back at what you've done so far, what features are you most proud of having built?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, often it's like the little things that like actually make me happy, especially like when I'm using it as a customer. I have like one, two, like I have like 7 entities on on Mercury, so I'm like a superpower user. Yeah, like you can create a virtual card so easily. It's like I literally every single time, like I use Mercury Personal, and every single time I sign up for anything now, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to go through like figuring out how to cancel with this random service. And like nowadays, more and more services require like a subscription just to get the thing. So I'm just like, okay, let me just create a card and like do this, and it takes like 2-3 clicks. It's just so easy to do that. Um, let's see other things like searching
You
through
create cards
things.
for every subscription. Is that right? Like a virtual
Basically,
card?
I mean, like
Yeah.
if I really
I didn't know you
know
could
I'm
do
gonna
that.
keep it forever, I won't necessarily create a new card for it. But if it's at all like questionable whether I'm gonna keep it for the rest of my life, I'm not gonna create a new card for it.
Hmm.
And that saved me like a ton of time. Like it's like I'm like random service. Like how am I gonna cancel it? I don't even have to think about that anymore. Uh, and yeah, just being able to search through transactions is super nice. Like, I'm like,
Yep.
what did I like? Have I paid this person? Like, I think that's like some of the basic stuff. The other thing that's really nice is the newish features, like being able to just like actually use this for personal as well, but business as well. Like being able to just drag in that PDF and it just like scans it all, saves it for the future. That's just been like so nice to like make like those bill payments like super simple. So probably those 3 features I use a lot personally and I'm proud of. But yeah, in general, just like having a product that's like it's actually quite a complicated product. I think that's the thing about Mercury that's like kind of deceptive. Like it's simple to do things, but it's like a very complicated product. Like we have like 5 different user permissions, and then you can also have a custom user permission that has like 15 different toggles because like when it comes to banking, people are not like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that like I can't set this kind of permission. They're like, hey, I can't use you unless I have a
Yeah.
my finance team has like uh uh you know accounts receivable manager, and for that person they only need these 3 permissions, and I do not want to give them any other permissions. I'm like, oh, that's pretty specific, but I like it kind of makes sense. So you have to have like a lot of power user features, but like you kind of have to hide that complexity behind like intuitive interfaces, and it's actually kind of tricky to do that. So I'm proud that we've like added all of that complexity over time, but not made it like kind of like a weird product to use.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most successful user experiences for a fintech product that I've seen. And I think, it's funny, like, you didn't mention a big feature. You mentioned
Oh,
you
the little
didn't,
ones,
when he
yeah.
asked you, you didn't mention a big feature. You mentioned the little nice, not even nice to haves, but the types of things that I would expect a true product person to mention, which is like, hey, these little things were so annoying, not just for me, but for everyone, and we fixed those. I thought even the safe thing and the bank account, separate bank, numbers and all that, and you folks being able to verify, like, one of the most impressive things, I know I tweeted a little bit about this and didn't get to share more, and didn't need to, but is this idea that you folks have somehow internally, I'm assuming this, created an organization that cares so much to fix the little things. And those little things are actually what add up. But the irony is the big thing you've done of just making banking easier, is how I describe it, is really what supports your ability to do all those other things. So if you didn't get the foundational thing right, you wouldn't be able to do all those small things. And I just find that fascinating that your answer was the little stuff, not the bigger stuff. And there's no right or wrong answer to that question, but it also means you're using your product all the time, right? Nothing better than that feeling for building, not for yourself, but essentially being a user of the product. So that, I'm sure that helps with the system. And I'm assuming most people at Mercury, if not everyone, is also a user of the product, especially now with the personal. So that's a super cool, I've always found that hack, so to speak, to be really valuable, where you can use
Yeah.
it. I know a lot of people pay lip service to that concept, but I think you're kind of embodying it in a bunch of meta ways that I think is really helpful for product development.
Yeah, I think dog fooding is essential. I also think another thing, I mean, I think you have to kind of decide like what is your differentiator as a company. And if you think like the product experience is a differentiator as a company, which like I think it should be for a lot of software companies, but definitely is for Mercury. I think people underestimate how important design is. And I did this as well. Like I'm an engineer, and I used to think of design as like, okay, you're like, you write the spec, you have the idea, and like you give it to them, and they'll give you like some pixels, and like you will do the work. I used to think like having the idea and the engineering was the most important thing, and the design was just like a little thing you did in between. Uh, but at Mercury, we were lucky to hire like as our first employee like an amazing designer, and she really like reset my whole expectation of like what design is, and it really does a bulk of the heavy lifting when it comes to all of this stuff. It's like, hey, how does all of this fit together? It's not just like the one screen; it's like all the screens, and then it's also just like re relitigating like, is it even the right thing to be doing in the right way, and like do customers actually care about it in this way? And like our designers lead a ton of our customer interviews. uh like we deliberately have this thing where we try to give like very light product specs, because like we want design to do almost all of the thinking. Like the product spec is just like, you know make X kind of work or fix X, and like the design is like where actually like most of it's thought out. And then we make the design step like a collaborative thing. So like we have other designers help. I mean, obviously if it's very trivial, it's trivial, but we have designers collaborate on designs, and then we also have like engineers and PMs also work with the designers. So it's like actually like I think the most important step in like a product process. And I've spoken to lots of people that like have like pretty big companies with like no designers on this stuff, and I'm like, how can you make a good product in that position?
I think that's a
I,
really profound thing. I'm not sure if you've talked about that publicly yet, but that I find the same thing. And like, companies really need a design first approach, especially your company, which is, it's started off as a B2B company, but it's almost like a consumer level design, consumer level like polish on it, right? And
I mean, I think you need that in like a lot of B2B companies now, because like the decisions are being made by like the people using it. It's no longer like some CIO somewhere making a decision and they don't care about the design. Like I think even to like if you're selling like maybe if you are selling to like some 100,000 person enterprise, like it's still like the top down CIO kind of thing. But I think for like mid market companies, it's like people who are going to use the product are making those decisions, and they want to use great products.
I
yeah,
mean, even the CIO needs great products. We sold to CIOs. They need great products, and they know it when they see it. I mean,
yeah,
we at our business, we spent a lot of time making sure that the engineering team could build the user experience we needed to build. And they spent a lot of time making sure that those things mapped out super well. So we had things that no product even today still has for those CIOs and those IT and security teams. And I think like the way you describe it, like it reminds me of something from back in the day that I really try to embody on the teams is actually from Eric Ries from Lean Startup. And I know you're super familiar, but like he would recommend dividing the team up into problem team and solution team. What it sounded like when you started talking about your specs was like they seem very problem centric and customer centric, and then the product design, and then also the folks getting roped in are more on the solution team. So what we've done is like when we generally structure teams is we'll have a problem team, solution team, not necessarily explicit, but the way the work is being divided is based on that. That way, what happens is if you come up with a solution, you can go back to the problem team and be like, did it solve the problem? Can you verify that based on what you know about the problem? Things like that are kind of, I think, counterintuitive for a lot of folks. But what ends up happening is you can't have in someone's head the problem and the solution at the same time to effectively evaluate both of those things is what I've sort of come to the conclusion of.
Don't you want like customers to tell you if you solve the problem rather than like
and that's
some
where the
intelligent-
problem team's signals are coming from. That's kind of the idea of that whole concept.
The problem
which is,
team represents the customer.
Exactly.
Basically.
And they stay on the problem side. They don't go into the solution side until the solution exists that they can evaluate against the problems.
Yeah, and in a small company, sometimes the CEO or someone leading the product team can represent that as well. Like, it was like the unbiased customer is like evaluating the product against that.
It's just super hard to be that honest unless you're actually very conscious of, am I talking about the solution or am I talking about the problem? And so just finding a mental way to divide it up or whatever processes you need, I think is really critical to ensure that you're honest about what you're solving for and why and for whom. I think that's where over time, especially at 700, 800, 1,000, whatever, you'll hit 2,000 obviously at some point, you start seeing a lot of that erode. And so even just you speaking of it the way you are and even talking about the minutia of the product gives me more confidence that even as it scales, hey, this stuff will be preserved of how you operate, because in certain markets, and I think this was your point too, like you need to do that. If you don't do that, you're not actually providing the right service to the customer. If you're not making everything usable, even though it's complicated, because it's really easy to just slap all those features on what the customer wants and then make permissions a mess. And now you've got a baking software with a permissions mess. Ooh, right? Like that's a problem.
And it's very tempting, right? Like because you do all the planning. You're like, hey, we have these other 5 things to do after this is done. Like, let's do the quickest thing, get this done. Like, who even cares? Who looks at the permissions screen anyway? And then you just like do that, like make that kind of decision like 10 times over, and like the product's like basically unusable.
Yep. One of my favorite parts of the product, I mean, I use the product very heavily, as Immad knows. I've given him a lot of feedback and his team a lot of feedback on like the product. And, one of the things I love about it, though, it really, helps me out is that how easy transfers are. And, I think that's a killer app for Mercury. It's super easy to transfer internationally or transfer domestically. I still get complaints from other people about this. I'm like, just use Mercury, there is like, it's so easy to do international wire transfers. It's so easy to even
You mean
transfer
just
things.
sending money?
Yeah.
When you call it transfers, like at least in Mercury, we think about it as like between entities you own rather than between like external things. But yes.
Yeah, send to external folks. Right?
Yeah.
Sending money is really easy on Mercury. It's just remarkably easier than any other bank that I've seen. And like, there's no like setting up a recipient is so easy. Like asking them to set up their own stuff is great. I think that's like you just put in their email address and they fill out their own profiles. Like, these are real innovations that actually save, I think, business owners lots of time. And even getting notifications about like money being sent and received. I find like a lot of people don't do that well. And it's really comforting to know like when money's come. Like I don't have to open my bank account. I just got an email about it or like a push notification, and I know it's done. So I think there's just a lot of things that add up. For me.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing in banking, and I don't know if this exists in other industries, is the bar was like really freaking low. It's like I'm thinking of like, oh, what's the advanced stuff we have? And you're like, wow, I was able to send money and like, yeah, I got an email about it. And I was like, yeah, that's true. I mean, that is like the bar was not like, we're not talking about rocket science. Like this was like, we built a product that like reached a reasonable standard.
That makes me want to bring it back to fundraising because apparently we're supposed to talk about your fundraise, right?
Yeah.
And so I have a question. If you're willing to answer, I don't think it's that hard of a question. Don't worry. Besides growth rate, what did the investors care about?
Yeah. Um, the thing that I'm always surprised because it's like you would think it only matters at like seed and maybe A, but like it always matters is like what is. I mean, sounds like kind of wishy washy, but like what is the vision and the market and like the trends around that? Like, I'm always like, okay, now it's just like, Mercury's so big, like it's just like here's the spreadsheet, like go invest kind of thing, but it's really not like that because like it's still the rough way someone described it to me at growth investing is they're looking for either 3x within 3 years or 5x within 5 years. Like that was like the high level metric they're looking for. So it's not, when at seed stage you're looking for 100x in 12 years, which is like more of a lottery, whereas like 3x in 3 years is actually like easier to underwrite. But it's still like, at the scale we had, we made 500 million last year. So like 3x is like 1.5 billion, right? Like it still requires like a ton of like unknowns to be figured out and like uh part of that is still like, okay, how big is that market, right? How big is your vision? Like what is your path towards it? What are like the secular trends that are going to drive it? Like it's like the same stuff you do at seed stage, right? Like you go like, this is the market, right? Like I'm like saying $2 trillion or whatever, and then you're like, this is the trend, like fintech is disrupting banking. Like I've said that every single fundraise, and like I still will probably say every single fundraise. And actually, like if you look at the best public companies, they're still saying the same things, right? Like it's like even Microsoft at 3 trillion, like he's like, Satcher's out there saying like, we're going to like, AI is going to just create like 5% GDP growth. And like, we're going to be the drivers of that. Like, it's like the same thing, right? Like, it's like this like it's crazy kind of vision. And like, that's what people are really betting on at every stage. Uh, so I think it's like easy to undervalue that as your company scales, but I think it's like super important still. So yeah, growth rate, vision. I think the other thing that is pretty different in growth rounds is like you need like a pretty strong data room, right? Like we spent basically all of December like making sure like, we had the accounts in order, we had like all the retention stats, we had like everything in place because, you know, ideally you just have this packet and you send it to people and then they can say like, hey, you know, I'm in, maybe I have one follow-up question kind of thing. Uh, Whereas, like, if you don't have like a good thing, then they'll ask you like 10 questions, and then everyone will ask you 10 different questions, and it will take forever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, what else is important in a fundraise? So good data room, underwriting 3x in 3 years.
Yeah, I think the data room is like really important, and like having a good finance team that can like, thankfully I didn't have to do too much of that. Like they just kind of ran the process and like had all the good data in there. But yeah, that's like critical. I would say like even at Series A, you should like my rough like timeline for fundraisers is like uh yeah, spend 1 to 2 weeks doing the data room and the deck. And that gets like a little longer as your company scales and you have like more to do. But I think especially seed, Series A, Series B, you can probably do it like in that time, right? And then spend 1 week practicing the pitch. Like go to friendlies, go to your founder friends, etc., and just say it over and over, like at least 10 times, I would say. Uh, then, like in that week, arrange all the intros, start talking to investors. First set of investors you want to talk to are like slightly friendlier or ones that you're maybe not that excited about because you're still practicing basically, but you're practicing live. And then the second week of pitching and the third week of pitching, that's when you put your like people that you really want to convert. We did about 24-ish VCs that in that whole process. At seed stage, you might do like more like 50 or something like that. But if you do that all in like 2-3 weeks, you're almost certainly going to get a deal done if you're fundable. Obviously, if you're not fundable, then maybe you won't get it done. But you need that kind of really short timeline and intensity, even at growth stage. I think the actual other thing that's key to that, I think it's like actually important all the way through. People disagree with me, is like I try to build like these VC relationships all the time. Like I'm in San Francisco. every 6 to 9 months, I'd go meet like 5 VCs. It's not that hard. Like it takes, I mean, nowadays it's all on Zoom mostly, but even if you take coffee, that's like 5 hours every 6 to 9 months. It's no big deal. Uh, so like I was actually looking it up just before this. Sonia, who's our lead at Sequoia, I met her first in October 2021. And I was not fundraising at all in October 2021. And I think I met her or other people at Sequoia like at least 2 or 3 times since October 2021. Uh, so by the time like you're fundraising, they've met you 2 or 3 times. So they're much more likely to just say, okay, let's invest. Whereas like if this is the first time they've ever met you, like, someone going to give you like $100 million after meeting you for like 2 weeks. Like it's just going to take them longer to just get to like a bar of like, you know, does Immad do what he says? And like, is this someone I want to spend like 10 years of my life getting to know more, right? Like that's like the bar to VCs investing is actually quite high. Like I don't think people understand. Like, Alex Rampel, who led our seed round in 2017, like he's basically met me like once every 1.5 months since 2017. Like that's a high bar of like getting spending time with someone. So yeah, VCs are not going to just like jump on you the first time they meet you, in my opinion.
Just going back to the VC's point though, like, but you don't talk numbers with them, right? When you meet them, it's like a relationship building
Oh yeah,
purely.
it's very, I mean, like maybe super high level numbers, but it's not like you want to like veer away from like this is a pitch, right? So whenever like they'll ask you questions that they're trying to make it a pitch, you just talk high level. You're just like, hey, they'll be like, yeah, what's your growth rate? You'll be like, oh yeah, we're growing really fast, like we're hitting our objectives, and like, and then I try to flip the questions on VCs. I'm like, oh yeah, what do you think is a good growth rate right now in the market for like these types of companies? And like, and like VCs kind of get it. Like you set it up as like, hey, let's just do a catch up, and like, they'll push it, but I think actually VCs are like pretty good about like understanding that like if you're not saying something, there's a reason for it, and they actually tend to not be like overly pushy in my experience. Uh, so yeah, you just talk high level, but like, you build like a real relationship. Like don't just, I think sometimes people think of VC as like super transactional. It's like, oh, I just want money from you. But, I'm like, hey, what have you been up to last weekend? It's like, not like in a fake way, but like, just like treat them like a normal human. And like you're meeting them every 6 to 9 months, like just get to know them, right?
Yeah, makes sense. I know we're running out of time here. I think one last question I had for you, Immad. I've gotten to see this whole journey from start to end now. Kind of when you were just starting, just a few employees, and now you have like as you said, almost 1,000 people. How is your journey? How do you think you have matured in this journey? You were a founder before. You've sold a company. You're a second-time founder. What are the biggest changes in you personally that Mercury has sort of wrought?
It's really hard to like look at yourself and like
Now's the
I
time.
think
You're
I
on the
think I need
couch.
like probably more hindsight to like answer that question well. I think one thing, I mean, it's definitely been a process that's made me a little more confident in my own decisions. Like there's this whole thing around like founder mode and stuff like that. Like uh I feel like I already went through that process to some extent. I mean, you go through it actually like your whole life as an entrepreneur where like, people tell you stuff and then you're like, oh yeah, this is the best management technique or this is the whatever, like these are the best like execs to hire. And you do them and then you're like, wow, this was just like a bad idea. And then you hear enough like smart sounding people give you like bad ideas that you do. And then you're like, okay, I should just probably, I mean, honestly, some of them are good ideas. They're just not the idea for you, right? Like, I think once you go through that process enough, eventually you're like, okay, you just need to know what is things you need to listen to, but like mostly listen to yourself at the end of the day. That's definitely something that like I've had to relearn over and over, and probably I'll have to relearn again and again. But yeah, once you learn it enough times, you become a little more confident in it. So yeah, a while ago, I had this like 1 year at Mercury where I just like did not enjoy it at all. It was like, I was doing the things I was supposed to do and hiring and like not really involved in the product and not really involved in like, these kind of more decisions that I actually liked making. I was just really doing the things that I thought I was supposed to be doing. At the end of the year, I was like, wow, like, I'm not going to be able to do this forever if I don't like what I'm doing. So then the next day I was like, okay, I need to be much more deliberate about like what I choose to do, and not just deliberately do things that I enjoy doing, which I think has been like is better for Mercury anyway, because like if I enjoy doing it, I'm probably better at it than not. Which is, I think, a lot of like what founder mode is about. It's like, I think there's a manager mode, which is like do the things that you're supposed to be doing, and I think to some extent founder mode is like picking the zone of genius that you're actually good at, and like actually like being willing to do it even if it like seems unscalable and is like really in the details.
Is your zone of genius a product? Like, what is your
product, talking to customers? Like, I'm a reluctantly good salesperson now as well, so like a combination of product customers is it used to be programming, but like like every time I try to touch code now, it's just like I'm like, what the hell is all of this? Like it's been too long.
AI does it all anyways now, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Maybe I'll be back to I'll be back to coding in no time with AI. Just like I'll send it over the problem and it'll give me the solution.
Yep. I think we have to wrap. Hiten, any last words?
No, this is awesome. And I think there's tons of lessons in here and lots of things that people are going to get a lot of value from. I just appreciate the discussion and how real you are, Immad. A lot of people will, I don't know, you're one of the most genuine and real founders that are around, in my opinion. I'm not saying that because you're successful now. I'm saying that because that's just your vibe, and it shows in the product. Like these things are a product of our opinions. At the end of the day. So I appreciate your opinion, and thanks for sharing more about it today.
Well, I think it's much more interesting if we can all be real with each other. But I appreciate you coming on the pod, Hiten, and acting as a host. And I guess we'll be back next week.
Always fun with you guys.
We'll be back next week. Thanks, everyone.